Hey everyone, Tim here, aka Renfail, and welcome to the unscripted episode 1 of, I don't know what we're going to call this, Mondays in MMORPGs or MMORPG Monday. Not sure what the title's going to be. I'm also testing some audio this morning. I'm going to run my air conditioner to see what the background is like. I'm still a little stuffy, be that as it may. We're going to move forward. The topic for today's episode is the milk run. This is something I love to bring up in presentations and when we're talking about what does epic really mean in terms of storyline. And one thing you'll never see is heroes doing things like going to the grocery store and getting a gallon of milk. Why don't we hear about that? Why don't we see Zeus going to the grocery store and getting a gallon of milk? Why don't we see Thor going and getting groceries from the local market? The reason is because these stories don't matter. They're not important in the grand scheme of things. They're mundane. They're not something that's interesting or noteworthy, and so they're never written down. They're just kind of assumed that the characters do these things on a day-to-day basis. And Thor and Zeus are probably the least likely candidates to do grocery store runs. They probably have other people to do that for them. But the point is, and the point that I'm trying to make is that mundane things are often buried in the background. When you're reading a good book, it's very rare that you hear about the day-to-day life of the heroes that you're reading about. You don't hear about every single time they go to the bathroom, or every single time they brush their teeth, or every single meal they eat, because it's not noteworthy. You want to hear about what's happening, that's the excitement, that's the adventure, that's the trauma, that's the dismay, that's the chaos. You want to hear about those things because that's what makes a good story good. That's what makes a good story interesting, is the things that are exciting and actually noteworthy. I see that the milk run, and I think this is one of the things that originally captured me in MMORPGs in the early days, was that it wasn't about just doing mundane tasks. It was about going out and doing something epic. Those of you who did the Coldane Ring and Shawl quests in EverQuest 1 or completed your epic weapons, 1.0 weapons in EverQuest 1 way back in the day, those of you who went through hell levels and spent, days upon end at the same level while having crazy adventures in Karnors with your friends or Sebelis and etc. These were things that are noteworthy. We were actually talking about this the other night because we've gone back and we're currently doing EverQuest 1 in our winter gaming session. We're on the Agnar server. And we're in voice chat and we're talking about these things. And the joke has been it's kind of silly, on one hand, to think about the fact that we can still remember zones and highlights from specific quests. We can actually remember quest NPC names, where they're located, the steps to greet these quests, etc. And this is stuff from back in 1999, 2000. So we're talking 17, 18 years ago. And yet it's been branded in our memory because it is epic in scope. It's not a milk run. This was something that meant something. It's something that required time. It took a lot of effort. You had to work with others to complete that task. This is why the story of Zeus going up against the Titans is so memorable, because he couldn't do it by himself. He had to enlist the help of his fellow brothers and gods, Hades and Poseidon. That's an epic story, not him making coffee first thing in the morning. So I think that that's something, when you look at the modern MMORPG, probably just call them MMOs if we want to be realistic about it, but storyline doesn't mean a lot, and you see a lot of milk runs happening. Just recently, last year, might have been a year and a half ago, I tried to get into Final Fantasy XIV, and it's a great game. I'm not going to deny that Final Fantasy XIV is a great game. It has some incredible dungeons, and it does have some incredible storyline. However, the Quest Hub content for me was a huge epic turnoff because none of it was interesting. I was doing fetch quests over and 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 grinding these things out to get experience. Same thing with the modern version of World of Warcraft, Star Wars: The Old Republic. I could point to 20 different MMORPGs that in and of themselves are great games. I've played all of these. I've enjoyed all of these games. But the one thing that eventually gets me to quit every single one of them is that I get tired of doing repetitive content. Furthermore, I've leveled up. At the time when Star Wars: The Old Republic launched, for example, I believe it was 4 characters back to back up to level 50, and it was just boom, 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 and I had a lot of fun doing that. But by the time I got done with the 4th one, I didn't want to do it again because it was going to be repeating the similar content. But what really got me was it's been several years since that game launched. I can't remember any of that content. None of it stood out as memorable. None of it was noteworthy. I didn't have to learn the zones because I had speeders taking me from point A to point B. I had glowing trails leading me from point A to point B. I didn't accomplish any truly epic tasks because they were all things that I could complete on my own in my spare time, like going to the grocery store and getting a gallon of milk. I don't need other people to do that with me. I don't need someone else to help me make coffee. Therefore, making coffee is something that it's just, I don't even think about it. I just do it. It's gut reaction. And as a result of that, I don't remember any truly memorable cups of coffee that I've made in my life because they've all been the same cup of coffee. And when you start looking at quests that way, these milk run quests, at the end of the day, they don't really offer you anything worthwhile in terms of remembering an MMORPG. And when we started looking at what we wanted to do this winter, we went back to EverQuest. This is the third time we've gone back to EverQuest. We did EverQuest 2 last year. We've done Elder Scrolls Online. I've done Star Wars: The Old Republic a couple times with people. I've done Star Trek Online with a couple people. But more than any other game, we keep coming back to EverQuest 1. And the reason for that is epic story. There's really no milk run quests in that game. You don't have these quest hubs where you load up on, fetch me 10 fangs, 10 pelts, 10 tails, 10 tongues, 10 eyes. There's not a lot of that going on. Instead, it's more along the lines of, oh, you want to do the screaming mace, you need the shiny brass shield, you want to do these things, you have to do all of these steps in the quest, and you got to go out and get these 4 different bandit tongues that drop from the bandit lords in these different zones, and each one might require you to be there for 2 or 3 hours or more in order to get those tongues. And then you might have to go all the way across the world as a low-level person and find an NPC in the middle of the ocean surrounded by level 20 mobs. And how do you get there when you're only level 7? And, there's all of these things that make the quests epic in scope, which means you remember them. They're memorable. You make friendships with the people that you're playing with. We had somebody on Facebook, I think a couple of weeks ago, saying that their favorite role to play in an MMORPG was a high DPS solo rogue. And I responded to that question with well, then why are you playing MMORPGs? Because MMOs are about multiplayer. It's about community. And he came back with this long argument about how, well, all the friends that he used to play with left, and there's no one left for me to play with anymore. Therefore, I don't like MMORPGs because I can't play with anybody. And it's like, well, maybe if you got out of your shell and talked to people, everybody starts off as strangers. But the other side of that coin is that the way the modern games are designed is that he doesn't have the opportunity to meet other people because everything is designed around these milk runs, these grocery store runs, these fetch quests that can be done in 90 seconds by yourself without ever needing to reach out to another person. The cards are kind of stacked against these people. They can't really find groups because it's more efficient for people to solo, so no one ever really wants to group. So if we can get back to the beginning of getting rid of milk runs and making quests meaningful, making storylines require teamwork, making things challenging and epic in scope, I think that will solve a lot of the issues that the current MMORPG industry is facing. Again, this is just my opinion. It's definitely what we're focusing on with what we're building, but we consistently see this as something coming up with the overall MMORPG community. And I think at the end of the day, it's just not economical for the vast majority of companies to make games that focus on that type of content because the vast majority of players would rather have that single player experience because it's so easy. Thankfully, not everyone's interested in easy. So on that note, this week we're back into Norath. Last week was our first week of the winter gaming session, so if anybody wants to join us, feel free. We're doing Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays on the mains, Tuesdays and Thursdays on the alts, sometimes on the weekends in between our own sessions. But we are already around level 10 to 12 with the mains and alts. And did some Crushbone last week. Now we're off to do, I believe, Runny Eye this week, and then some Befallen, and then we're going to look beyond that. So, food for thought. Let me know what you guys think about this first episode. I'm just kind of winging it now. I'll be refining these as they go along. See where we take this. Anyway, episode 1, Mondays in MMORPGs, or MMORPG Mondays, along with the Milk Run. So, talk to you guys later. Cheers.